Welcome back, pilots, to this Jetworks build series where we're building the awesome B2 Spirit bomber. In this build I'm running twin 64s on 4S. Unfortunately I'm not putting landing gear in this build, but I'm pretty sure you'll be able to manage that on your way through each step as it's clearly labelled. So the first step is securing the wings together. So here I've got it cut out, and each set, just try and remember, make sure you do it in the mirrored part. So rather than cut all the way through, I'd left tiny wee gaps where I'd kept the foam together, so that when I get to putting the carbon fibre rods in, the spacing should be even all the way down it. So I'm just getting some low tack masking tape ready to cover up the slot in preparation for adding the carbon fibre tube. So here I've just teased it out using some of the tape, like I say, just to try and hold it together and get that even gap all the way along it. A bit fiddly with the tape, and then just trimming out the end piece, tucking it around, just folding up the tape so I've got a wee purchase for pulling it off. And then do the same with the opposite side. Now it's at this point I realised that something's no quite right. I didn't do it as the mirrored part. So I took the tape off and started over again, putting the tape on the opposite side of the wing, so we had two mirrored pieces. So here we are mixing up some epoxy for it, but for whatever reason, I'm not sure if any understand why or give me any wee tips, but the epoxy seemed to have been quite grainy and looked like it was setting, so I used it anyway. Thought, well, there's no harm in trying, there's only one way to find it. So I mixed up some hardener. I think there was about 25 grams of epoxy that I'd mixed up here, and just carefully putting it into the gap ready for accepting the carbon fibre rods, and then just gently teasing it out to the outsides, making sure that you've got it on the outside of the foam and not just a pool of glue at the bottom. Putting the carbon fibre rods and tucked over the tape at the ends just to make sure that none of the epoxy seeped out. And then a couple of 6S bricks on top of it. So here we're doing the centre section. Now I already have it made here. Unfortunately this is, or fortunately, whatever way you look at it, this was from my last build where I crashed it and kept the centre section because I knew I was going to build another. In the plans it's quite easy to see and understand how it goes together in terms of the measurements and stuff, but I just used some thread, put some thread along it, tied it together, and then used a wee bit CA glue just to hold it in place. So here I'm just using the rod again just to space it so I've got a nice even gap all the way along it. Lining it with a bit of tape ready to accept some epoxy again so we can secure the centre section in place. So here I'm just lining it up, making sure you've got the angles at the you put the rod in at the correct orientation so that you've got wee beveled angles at the end so it can butt up nicely against the main wing carbon spars. See, I'm just taping it up, keeping it nice and close together so that I can get some glue in the centre and just hold it together. A wee bit extra support. Wipe away any of the excess glue, and again mix up some epoxy with the grainy stuff that I had, but it worked quite well. So again, just put it into the groove and then tease it out to the outsides to make sure there's a nice even application all the way along it. And then another couple of 6S bricks on it just to hold it down and in place and give it time to cure and go off. So next part is the latitudinal support, part 2. It's marked on the template, a curve all the way around it, so I've pre-sanded this. This was one of the parts that I did actually pre-sand. And then just on the underside, just marking it out lightly with a pen so I could see where it is I'm putting the glue onto it. So I just don't put glue in the wrong places. Me being keen and eager to crack on with the build. So just on smudging it about, just so there's a nice even bit of glue on each surface. Give it a chance to dry a wee bit and then offer it up. So here, next couple of steps, the longitudinal pieces is very quick and simple enough. There's a wee taper end at the top, the thick end of the longitudinal pieces. 1 through to 5. Just make sure you put them in the right orientation. So a small amount of glue along the build surface. Sorry, the contact surface. Last thing we want to be doing is sticking the model to the table. And just gently tease into place. Again, just a small amount on the contact surfaces, don't need a lot. This is a very quick build. I have obviously 6mm Depron here. It's the large sheets that I have, and I've used 1.5 sheets of Depron to get the B2 together. Very simple, quick build with very little foam for a super model. So here we are again on the next longitudinal piece. Again, very simple, just a wee spot of glue in the contact surfaces. And on to longitudinal 3, part 5. Again, simple. Just a tiny bit on the contact surface and just offer it up. Now I have been test fitting these. Obviously in the video you'll see me just going straight to it and pushing them in, but I do test fit each piece before I add the glue to it. And on to the last one. Small amount of glue on the contact surface, and I did put a wee bit on the bottom plate there that's on it. Latitudinal part 7, the long ones. So very simple part here. Obviously there's a locating tab. A wee bit of glue on the contact surfaces there where it's going to meet up against. With the Yoo-hoo pour, I still need to try a different glue. I think it was 1 full tube that I used. Just using a couple of wee modelling pins just to tack it into place up against the longitudinal supports. Do the same with the opposite side. So obviously, as I was saying, at this part you would put in your plies for the retracts, which I'm not actually doing here, but it's simple enough. Now this part confused me a wee bit because I actually cut an extra couple of pieces. So just follow the plans, make sure if there's a mirrored part you cut 2, and if it doesn't say mirrored, only cut 1. So here we are with the centre sections of the lower nose cone. And the first part we just lined it up against the sides of the battery bay. Now there is spacings here, so that obviously if you are putting retracts in it, they're cut for a certain orientation so that there's space for your nose wheel to come in and out. So with a wee bit messing about and fiddling, I managed to figure out where they went. Obviously if you look at the build guide, the picture that was just up previous to this, if you sit and look at it, it's quite simple to see where they actually go. But I just put them in piece by piece. As you can see, I've not actually sanded off the corners as per the plans. What the intention was to build it, and then when I get the bottom wing plates and stuff on it, I'll give it all a sand and get it to the shape that I want it to. And this wee middle part, what I did was I built it all together first, rather than trying to put in each section like I have done previously. Just tease it into place. Now, if you're using contact glue, do give it time to cool, to air off so that it sticks in easily. So the bulkhead 1 here, there's a tiny wee raise point in the center. Just make sure you've got the raise point pointing upwards. A couple of modelling pins just to tack it into place. And then the lower reinforcement piece as well. Small amount of glue along the contact surfaces and then slide into position. Fitted absolutely lovely. So next step is the steering servos and lower bulkhead 2. Obviously I've not cut out the steering servo. I did wonder am I going to put it in, because obviously I'm not using retracts, but I put it in anyway just for a wee bit extra support. And then lower bulkhead 2. Again, a small amount of glue in the contact surfaces. We modelling pin just to tack it into place. Next step, again very quick and simple, bulkhead 3 and the bomb base servos. Servo mount, sorry. Small amount of glue on the wing plate. Offer up the bomb base servo there. Obviously at this time if you were putting a bomb bay in it, you would make sure you get your servos in it just now. I suppose you could do it later, but if you were to cut it and put it in just now, it just makes for easier process. Next step, simple, centre line support, and obviously if you're doing retracts, your wee 3mm plies in there as well. As you can see I've marked on the wing there, LG, where the landing gear should be if you're going to build it. It's in with the centrepiece. Now the ply front retract chassis supports, I haven't used them obviously because I don't have the retracts in it, and it should be strong enough. On my last build I did the same, and it certainly held up until I tried to make it a lawn dart. So here I'm looking at the plans and I'm thinking, where's the positioning for the servo? Couldn't see it on the plans, but it is later on in the build, so don't worry about it. Again, the forward box bar I haven't put in that as well. This part, make sure you sand it. I didn't. I just put it in quite and happy to crack on with the build. So rather than putting the top wing plate on and then the centre line supports, I decided to put them on, make sure it was glued and tacked down very well before I put them on it, just to save fiddling about. Again, these should be sanded. There's a line on the plans just for marking and feathering it off to the back. Again, yes, I didn't sand it at this point. Usual, too keen and eager to go on with the build. So a small amount of glue just around the outsides. You could probably put a little bit extra near the bottom where it tapers away. And just line it up with the EDF mounts. Make sure it's nice and true. Along the back of the bay. I'm just turning it over, keep it a nice flat flush surface. I'm going to add a couple of 6 and 4/8 bricks to it just to hold it down till the glue cures. Let's say contact adhesives. If you put your glue on, offer them up to each other and then give them a bit of air time to dry, it sticks much quicker than how I've done it. So next step here is on to the lower wing pieces. Now as you can see there, it says a 3mm groove. Nope, I just cut it. Yeah, make sure you do a 3mm groove. I'm sure I should have just cut it the last time I was doing this, the last time I built one. So here I'm just testing up the servos in the orientation as per the plans and the cutouts, and I see that with these servos the wires come out the opposite side. Obviously I've already cut the pieces. I did think about cutting a new piece and having the wires go out the top end, but I just went with what we had here. And I'm just trimming it out to make sure the servos fit nice and tightly. thinking about how we can keep the top of the wing plate as nice and clean and flush as well. So once I'd marked out all the servos and happy with the cut positions, a small amount of glue on one side, smudge them together so it's just a very thin application. Line it up to the wing plate itself, make sure it's nice and square. Now as you can see, it was a bit of a challenge just to try and keep the airframe in the camera view because it's quite big. So I just marked up, test fitting the servos, putting them in place and figuring out how many extension cables. And a wee think about where I'm going to run the wires. So the last build, I actually ran it across the wing plate as to where we are and then up the centre section. But this time what I chose to do was run it up the front of the wing plate. As I'm sitting here thinking about it, I'm thinking where am I going to put it. So at this point, obviously I'd marked on the wings, I'm thinking, where's the servo? But on the bottom tray, there's a servo mount already marked when you cut it off. As we're running elevons, I've cut the servo position in the wrong orientation. Obviously with elevons you need both servos to be pointing in the same direction. In terms of if the control horn's coming out the right hand side, make sure it's the same on both servos on one side of the wing, and then the opposite side again making sure that both control horns are coming out the left hand side, or it will take a bit more mixing and you won't be able to use Y cables. So again here I'm just figuring out, right, where is it I'm putting the wires, and then I decided, yeah, I'm going to take it out the front of the longitudinal spar and then run it all the way along to the nose. So once I was happy with the servo position and where I was going to put the wires, we spot of hot glue for the servos just to hold them in place, and I put just a tiny wee spot on the rear ones just to tack them into position. And just feeding the cables through, tidying up the wires a wee bit before I decided what I was going to do. Now the last time I built it, what I did was I just filled the grooves, well, filled the channel with lightweight filler, but this time I decided to use the foam cutout, cut it in half, and then just gently glue that on top just to hide the wires, so that if I ever need to get back into it, it should be a bit cleaner than having to dig out lightweight filler. Should be easier to pick out a bit of foam, and it actually worked pretty well. A wee bit of trimming, put it into place. So the next step here is shaping the underside of the top rear section. So the bit that I needed to sand, I've sanded it down, and then as you can see there, there's a line along it. I actually sanded this piece. I checked the plans, and yes, it had to be sanded before I put it back together. So rather than build it, lick it and stick it, then sand it, I chose to actually follow the guide here. So a small amount of glue along the contact surface, just smudge it about and then tease it into place. I noticed there was a wee bit of glue missing there. Tidying up some of the excess, and offer it up into position, just using a wee modelling pin just to keep it nice and flush against the battery bay insides. It's taking shape pretty quickly. So here, like I said, with thinking about how we were going to keep the top plate nice and clean, just got a wee bit of tape there, taping up the visual side so that I've kept the servo cutouts as well, so that when we glue them in, it's gluing to the tape and not the servo, just in case I need to replace the servo. Just to try and tidy it up a wee bit. using foam rather than filler. I will go back over it with a wee bit of filler and fill up the gaps, but this worked pretty well. It was a couple of mil raised, but it just sanded it back so it was nice and flush. So the next step is laminating the elevon pieces, giving them a wee shape. So I've already sanded them, cut them out, sanded them so there's a nice wee trailing edge, and we're just installing the hinges here. So what I'm doing is just using the wee hinge and marking up where it is I'm going to cut it, and then carefully just cut a couple of millimeters deep. Down to as far as you can with the pen marks, and just carefully tapping a wee bit out. Just test fit, make sure it seems nice and flush. And then here with the drag brakes, again what we're doing, rather than on the inside, these hinges are going to sit on the outside of the wing plate, so that they open, close nice and flush, but open up as a brake. So it's a wee bit different than putting hinges in the centre of your ailerons. So cut them all out, mixed up a wee bit of epoxy, and at this point I'm just putting just enough on it just to make contact with the hinges. I don't want too much in any of the epoxy coming out into the hinge and then seizing them up. That wouldn't be very handy. And I'm just using 5-minute epoxy here. And so on the elevators, and it's elevators, ailerons, elevons, I've only put in the hinge in one side of the foam, just gluing it to one side. No point in cutting out both pieces. And I'm just teasing the hinges just to make sure there's no excess glue got on it and seize them up. So here I've just used a small amount of Yoo-hoo, mixing them about, giving it a smudge so it's a nice thin application on each piece. As you can see, I'm doing it in mirrored sections here. And using a couple of batteries as weights and just leveling them down, just making sure that the glue is set around the hinges. Quite happy with how they're looking, teasing them about, and the hinges were glued pretty successfully. And then just give it a chance to cure. So here we are with the centre piece. I'm using the hinges, just marking along the wing plate where it is I'm going to cut a small slot, 2 or 3 mil slot in the centre, just to allow gap for the hinges to go in place. Took a wee bit fiddling a bit, especially because I'm having to use one hand and hold it up. It's quite fiddly. Small amount of Yoo-hoo pour. Again, like I say, just enough to get good contact, because I don't want any oozing out and into the hinges. And then do the same on the other control surface. And the glue that I'm putting on the hinge, I'm just smudging it out so it's nice and flat and level. Then give it time to cure, do the same with the opposite side. So the next step in the guide is fitting the bomb bay doors, and at this point this is where I kind of deviate away from the plans a bit and just do it step by step, because I was waiting on electrics coming, so I won't be 100% by the plans. There will be certain parts of it we still go with, but in terms of 2 steps in each page, it's not quite the same. So the bomb bay doors are fitted, so we're going to do bulkhead 2 and 3 now, part 30 and 31. Again, very simple processes, quick easy steps in the build. Small amount of glue on the locator tabs and slide it into position just to have a look at the contact surfaces. I'd forgot a wee bit of glue in the bottom there. So the next step, we're doing bulkhead 4. The plans will ask you to do the Bombay hoppers and stuff, but like I say, I'm just doing each wee bit that I've seen that fits the build in terms of how I'm doing it here. So a small amount of glue, offer up, give it a wee chance to air dry as it is contact glue. And we'll also fit in bulkhead number 5 as well. So there's 5 in place, give the other one a wee bit of time to air dry. So the next step, we're going to do the centre support rear, get that in place. Small amount on the contact surfaces, and what I did was I took it off, just give it a wee chance to air dry a bit, and noticed another couple of spots that I needed to put on in place. Again, very simple. So now we're going to get onto the Bombay hopper. So we're building this, just pushing out the insert, and I'm just test fitting it, see how it lines up. It's all pretty good. Small amount of glue in the contact surface, and then offer it up into place. Give it a wee chance to air dry a touch, so that when we offer it up, it sticks better. And then we're going on to assembling the hatch now. So all the pieces out in place in terms of, had a look at the plans to see what end sat on which part. Small amount of glue and line them up, put them into place, put the wee locator tab in, we test fit, make sure I was happy with it, we trim because I had to squeeze it in a bit, I wanted it to be nice and flush. Small amount of glue on the tabs at the sides as well. And then on the back, well, it's actually the front when it gets onto the model. Once I was happy with a wee test fit and everything looked like it was cut out pretty well for a change. Small amount of glue on the contact surface. Used a wee modelling pin just to tack them in place. And then the next part is the hopper lid. So we're just building the hopper hatch. Small amount of glue on the contact surfaces. Now I have trimmed it up a little, but I will do a wee bit trimming later on. So the next step that we're going to do is we're going to install the leading edge formers on the top and the bottom. Again, I've not sanded these down and put the wee shims in place, trimming off the angles. So I'm going to trim it up, we test fit. Once I was happy that I knew where they were going and up against the wing plate, small amount of glue and offer them up in place. Very simple and quick. Do the same on the opposite side as well. And there's only the 2 for the top. Once we've done that, moving on to the bottom. Move the wires out the way. We test fit to see where they're going to go. And trim off the wee bits that needs to be done so it's nice and flush against the longitudinal supports. Once I was happy that the fit was pretty good, fitted them in place, and then obviously because I'm running the wires along the front, I've cut a small relief in each of the formers there. So the next step is the 3mm upper tailpiece. So I cut this out. I left a couple of millimeters at each side just for, just to make sure it was a nice fit. I wasn't cutting it too small. We test fit and we trim so it was sitting nice and flush on the bottom, well against the wing plate. Just sort of lining it up in place that I was happy with where everything was going to go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a bit of hot glue here so that when it goes on it's a quicker bond and I know it's secure and in place. And just a tiny bit along the front contact surface there. Now I didn't put any along the edges and it wasn't until after it that I realised, but we'll get back to that. probably use a bit of filler. So next step was the 3mm hopper sides. Again, just a small amount of hot glue, tack that into place. Hold on till it cures a couple of minutes, and then do the same with the opposite side. Now I'm building from the back to the front just so I can try and keep everything as flush and as clean as possible. There is a couple of spots where I will add a bit of filler. And when the hopper sides were on, I just trimmed it off so it was nice and flush. Put the hopper lid on just to see how it sits, how it's going to look. With the hopper lid sitting on top of the airframe, again using a wee bit of hot glue. Now I've just got it on one side. I'm just trying to get it nice and flush, as clean a finish as possible, so that I don't need to trim too much off, or I'm only trimming off on the one side. Once I was happy that that was the first side it had stuck, took it off, got a wee bit of low tack masking tape on the airframe just so that if any hot glue comes out, it doesn't stick it to the airframe. Once that was done, it was time to get on to the cover for the front deck. Now in the plan there is no cutout for this. I checked and I wasn't sure. I thought it was there, maybe I'd missed it, but it's not there. Very simple, just take a spare piece of 3mm foam. Here I'm just measuring it up, making sure I'm happy with how it fits, that the hopper's in place. Just testing it with the nose. Obviously I'm putting the intakes in there just so that everything's lined up, and I'm quite happy that the hopper's got a nice fitting. There's a hopper, sorry, not the hopper, the hatch. That's a hopper lid at the back there that I'm putting on. So now that we've got the hatch ready, I'm happy with the spacing. I've got a spare piece of 3mm foam, oversized cut, and I'm just curving it so I can get a nice even bend to it. A small amount of glue along the edge, and then a wee bit along the ribs itself. Hold it nice and flush to the table until the glue cures, and then a small piece of hot glue along the other sides, and then we'll roll it against the table and keep it nice and flush, and that will give us our hatch lid, our hatch cover, sorry. Once the glue is cured, quite happy with how it is. Just trim away the excess. Get all the big bits out the way first, and then we'll just go in with a nice sharp razor blade. Just be careful, a nice sharp blade, and just trim it along the edges to get it nice and smooth. I was quite happy with how the finish was looking there. So onto the hopper lid. I've 3D printed a small aerial type, just so that I can use that as a handle for access to the hatch and then into the batteries, because obviously it's held in with a magnet. So I printed that off and just hot glued it into position. So the next step here is the ESCs. Obviously if you are not using the 3D printed parts, the plans shows you quite well explained how to go about using the formers and stuff. So here I'm just test fitting one of the EDF units. I'd actually snapped the EDF housing. Here on the of lightweight printed the thrust tubes. I'm just cutting a small relief for the wires to come through for the motor wires. Once I was happy how everything was looking now, just removed everything and ready to start gluing it up and putting it into place. So a small amount of glue along the mouth, the bell mouth of the EDF. Unfortunately these ones, the X-Flies, the bell mouth doesn't come off, it's not removable. I did think about cutting it off, but I thought it'll be fine the way it is. So with some glue on the contact surfaces and a wee bit fiddling to get it sliding into position, I've got the motor wires pointing towards the inside. As we're looking at it, probably about 2 o'clock in terms of direction where the motor wires are coming out. Just kind of getting into place. Obviously I've put glue along the contact surfaces. I'm just removing the wires and putting them back in so that they're nice and flush and level, not as twisted, just to try and keep a nice clean airflow, well, as best as possible. So with the thrust tubes, just forcing that into the holes provided there, the wee slots. Making sure it's nice and flush against the wing plate. Push the motor back and making sure that's flush against the thrust tube. And then the 3D printed intakes. These are done in PLA. Keep them nice and tight at the front. And then I'm sliding that up against the bell mouth of the EDF. Removing any of the excess glue. And just making sure it's nice and clean and flush as possible. And it's lined up. So that we're going to get a good airflow in and out of the motor. Once I was quite happy with it, was just fiddling about, just making sure the position was exactly where I wanted it to be, and then just checking the rear that the thrust tube's lined up against the wing plate. So the next part, we're just carrying on with the lightweight printed parts, attaching them to it. Got a wee bit sanding just so it was nice and flush. Usually I mark out what's left and what's right, but this time I kind of forgot, and I just sized them up against it to see what looked the best. And once I figured out what one it was I was putting on it, then a wee spot of hot glue along just the contact surfaces at each side, so that when I push it down it tacks in nice and tight against the wing plate. I've got some U-Hoop along the 6mm foam EDF formers, the motor mounts. Tiny wee spot of hot glue in the front of the intake, slide that into position, and then the slight gaps here I will use a wee bit of filler later on and just smoothen it off so it's nice and clean. And then we'll do the same with the opposite side. So the next step here is the upper bulkhead one. Obviously I've 3D printed the main canopy itself. So I've just got the hatch in place there, sizing it up to see where it's going to go, because obviously I don't have the box bar down there as well, or the 3mm ply plates for the landing gear. So a wee bit of U-Hoop on the printed nose cones, or canopy, sorry, and just smudge the glue out so it's nice and thin application. Not wanting too much yet smudging about, and then just slide into place and just making sure it's lined up as neat as I can with the intakes. Now that both of them are in, it was time to just secure the ESCs, take care of some of the wiring and tuck that into place and make sure I was happy with where everything is. So with the wee hole that obviously I've cut, there was a wee gap left, and what I tend to do is just use a wee bit of fiberglass cloth and just hit it with a wee bit CA, and that seals up the holes very well. I used to use tape, but sometimes I find that the tape just peels away. So yeah, I've been starting to do that with a wee bit of fiberglass cloth and a wee bit CA glue, sealing the holes, and it works fantastic. So once I've got the wires all in place, I'm just happy that they're fed through. A wee bit of hot glue onto the ESCs. I've got 50 amp ESCs in this one. Once they're secured, it was time to just get all the wiring wired up to the receiver. I've got a 6 channel receiver. I may switch it out to a 10, not too sure. We'll see how I go with the programming, and just checking that all the wiring, everything's all good. Motors run in the right direction, servos are moving in the right direction, or at least they're all connected anyway and moving. Obviously they will be centered as we're moving about. So before I close it up, just check the wires and obviously onto the belly panels here. So just sizing it up, a wee test fit, making sure I was happy with everything, where it was going to go. Obviously I've got the servo still to come through, and a wee tidy up of some of the bits of foam that I didn't actually sand earlier, but it was all looking good. Took the wee spot glue that was holding the servo off, fed it through, making sure the wires were in place. I was happy with where they were going to go before I glued it down, so that we're not gluing wires over the longitudinal spars. And then a small amount of Yoo-hoo along the surfaces. I did use a wee bit of hot glue as well, just to tack some parts of it, the main parts of it down. But on this side you'll see that we kind of missed it. So here we are on the opposite side. I've got a wee bit of hot glue just along the centre seams and the front longitudinal spar. Make sure you've got servos through, you're quite happy with the fit, and allow the glue to cure. So here we are just marking out where we're going to put some 3D printed vents, so we've got airflow on both sides. Keep the ACs nice and cool. Marked it off on both sides, cut it out where we're going to put, locate it, and you can see this, the ESCs are right below it, and do the same with the opposite side. Where we were there, a wee bit of filler. So the next step, I'm going to do the leading edges, and we're pretty close to the end of the build. So as you can see here, on the top, the plans actually say the lower front edge, but it's the top front edge. So I'm adding an extra wee former just right next to the intake here, just so there's got a wee bit of purchase on it, and just freehand cutting, trimming it off a wee bit, putting it in place, and then that way the former's got somewhere to sit right at the nose. Small amount of Yoo-hoo along the bottom and the first 2/3 of it really. Smudge it about so there's a bit of contact, and then we will give it a wee bit of time to air dry. And then what I'm going to do, some glue along there, and then I'm going to put some hot glue just on the curves and up against the wing plate, so I've got a quick bond. And then we do the same with the opposite sides, just give it a wee bit of curve on the edge of the table. And then moving on to the bottom again, you will see that the plan says it's it says lower front edge was what we did. So on the bottom it's saying the upper front edge. Don't worry about it. I'm sure if you try to put the upper front edge on the top, you'll realise that it's too big. So a wee spelling mistake there in the plans. Craig is aware. I have spoke to him about it. But for all it is, I'm sure it's not that much of a drama. So there we are, we've got the lower front edge on. I've curved it against the table, and again a small amount of Yoo-hoo pour just along the contact surface, and we're using a wee bit of hot glue just on the formers themselves. Give that a chance to bond, go off and do the same on the opposite side. So the next step, we're moving on to the drag rudders, and this is the last part of the build really. So obviously with the tailerons and ailerons and elevons and all those fancy stuff, we've got the hinges on the centre of the control surfaces, whereas here we've got two separate control surfaces for the drag brakes. And all I've done is just marked out where the hinges are going to go on the outside of the wing plate, and just carefully cutting out just a couple of mils, just enough space to accept the hinges. Cut out the wee tabs, and again I'm going to use 5 minute epoxy here. And make sure when you do it like this, each one that you mark out, you make sure that you leave that there and use the next control surface for the next marking, or sometimes you can get the cutouts wrong. So a small amount of 5 minute epoxy just around the outsides, the edges, so that we make sure we've got a nice bond, and then the tiniest amount on the underside of the hinge that's going to go against the wing plate. A wee bit of tape there so that when we put them together, we can tape them together and keep them nice and flush. And then left myself 5 minutes of holding on there. So now that we've got the drag brakes ready, moving on to the control arms that I've used or built. So as you can see, those are inch squares on the build mat. And then just marking out, I've got one control horn ready, and I'm just getting another one to roughly, or as best as I can, the same size. I'm just putting a wee bit of thread around it, same idea as I did with the main wing spar. Marked it up as to where they're going to go, and a good bit of thread wrapped around it, and a wee spot of CA glue just to hold it, and then some more thread along the top of it. Didn't take long for the CA to go off. Cut away the thread. Once I was happy that they were pretty much the same and nice and strong, I've just got a wee bit of shrink wrap just putting over the thread, just to tighten up a wee bit if there was any. And again here it was difficult trying to make sure that I've at least got it in the camera view. So as you can see, I've got the control horns and push rods all wired into the servos. Everything's all been centered in here. I'm just marking out where the drag rudder control arms are going to go. Ideally, I would like the servo to be, the servo horn furthest away from the control surface, because where I've got the push rods connecting each other is very close to the servo horn itself, servo arm. So I've got the linkages on, and I'm just measuring it up, trying to get the linkages as close to the edge of the drag rudders itself, between the edge of the rudder and the wing plate, just trying to get it nice and even. What I'm doing is just gently cutting through and marking where I'm going to push the push rod through, and hopefully that's just enough space to get it through. It will be a wee bit tight, trying to get them even. It will take a bit of fiddling about and fine tuning to get them to exactly where you want them to be. So pushing one end through, and the push rod, the long part of it, through into the end stopper. Mark out where the control horn's going to go, push that into the wing, and then I use some hot glue just to secure it in place. I'm pretty sure we missed that in the video as well. Tried zooming out and stuff, but yeah, it wasn't on the camera, didn't catch it. So here I'm just moving the drag rudders. See that I was happy with the movements. I've reduced the end stops down to about 30% travel just before I start trying to tune them in, so that one's closed while both drag rudders are open, probably about 20 to 30 degrees. When I push left and it closes, it doesn't try to go any further than just closed. So I'd reduced the end stops down to about 30%, I think it was, in each servo, on the left and on the right, and then I just sort of fine tuned the end stops to get them to that opening closing position that I was looking for. So just hold them in place into the glue sets, and then do the same with the opposite side. And that's it, pretty much. The B2's ready. Ready to get a final sand, a wee bit of trimming, checking on the control surfaces and end stops and where you want the mixing. Ready to hit the paint shop. So yeah, very easy, quick build. Not a lot to it. Like I say, sorry I didn't follow the plans, and obviously I've not got the landing gear in place, but I'm going to add some balsa leading edge, a wee bit on the end as well, just to protect the drag ladders with my crazy landing. But that's it, guys. Here's a couple of pictures of my old B2. Hopefully I'll not smash this one, but thanks for staying this long. If you have, hopefully I can see some B2s build in the future. Best of luck, pilots. Thanks for watching.